I just think the great kickers make that difference. Everybody talks about Lynn Elliott when I left it, and it was. I don't think revenge is a first class emotion, but I got lots of calls when he did what he did, and I didn't want to leave Kansas City. That's a story we can go into if you want. But bottom line is, when you have a kicker that's going to make your big kicks, that 1 or 2 games is the difference.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome into another episode of Hang Time with myself, Hayley Lewis, as well as Dustin Colquitt. You might have heard of him. He might have done some stuff. He might have won a Super Bowl and, things like that. But we're going to dive right in. We got a really important guest on today. Just a funny guest, I would say, is the best way to describe him. Funny, iconic phrases, great stories, and a lot of insight. Also, he did a lot for Kansas City and what the Chiefs are today. Dustin, I will let you introduce our guest.
He's very charming. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler for the Kansas City Chiefs. At his retirement, he led the NFL in kicks, 1,466 points. And Nick Lowery, unbelievable for our community. He was I would compare him to Harrison Butker, whereas the offense knew, hey, we only have to get to the 35, 36-yard line, and this guy's going to come in and finish off drives we need him to. And so Nick Lowery had a special 14-year career. In 2009, got put in the Ring of Honor, and super pumped about having him on Hang Time today with Hayley Lewis and the News.
Yeah, definitely a great interview. I think charming is the best way to say what he is. And he also had, a lot of great insight. But then we hear about his charity. We hear about what he does in the community. So make sure you stick around to the end of the interview. He also brought up the game against the Bengals, talking about being there, talking about getting to watch, mentioning Butker, and just the dependability that maybe that's the incorrect way to say that, but just how dependable Butker is for Kansas City and how the Chiefs can just rely on him. I mean, you watch the game, I'm sure, 51-yarder to put it through the uprights to seal the deal. It's just like you don't even have to be concerned. Just get him in field goal range, and it's going to happen,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how I feel when Harrison takes the field. That's what I knew we were getting in 2017 when Cairo went down and he came in. And he's been doing a great job ever since. I know that, Patrick, if you talk to Patrick Mahomes about, where he has to get to, look, he can, if you give him 13 seconds, he's going to score a touchdown. But when we have found different ways to win these ball games, and when they're that tight, you got to have a Harrison Butker on your team, just like a Nick Lowery.
There you go. So let's hear from the man now. We got a Chiefs legend. We got an NFL legend. Let's just go ahead and sauce you all up. Joining us, Nick, we do appreciate it, though. We have a lot to talk about, and I'm sure there are a lot of old stories that I'm going to have my eyes wide open to listen to. But we'll roll in with the first one. How cool has it been just seeing this franchise do what they do? It's pretty special to see how they've taken off ever since, since Andy Reid got in town, and then with the combination of Patrick Mahomes. What does it feel like watching, the franchise you were once a part of now developing into this dynastic run that they are?
Well, I had 10 years of rather mediocre Chiefs franchise in the 80s, right? And then Marty Schottenheimer came in immediately within 2 weeks. The culture was different. We had almost the same personnel. We were a tougher team. And then the 90s, we were pretty darn good. I mean, my last year, I wish it was not my last year. We can talk about that if you want. With Joe Montana, we went to the AFC Championship game. And except for about 3 years in the early 2000s, Dick Vermeil and post-Dick Vermeil, this team's been pretty darn good. But now we've taken it to a dynastic, to use your word, level. And it's incredibly fun, not only because they're a great team, but because you got a combination of a great ownership family, one of the coolest coaches ever, period, in history, measured easily by being able to bring 2 different teams in 2 cities to the Super Bowl, but also how he just manages things. He's so humble. And you got the equal to him as a quarterback who manages his fame better than any player I've ever seen. What I love about him is, they had on the quarterback show, right, when he's getting hit, and he had the mic on him. He goes, great hit, great hit. I'm thinking, if that guy's just drilling me into the ground so that I'm impaled 3 inches into the ground, I don't think I would have gotten up so quickly and been so light and positive, like, great job. But everybody loves him, and I think maybe for that reason, Patrick Mahomes maybe isn't hit quite so hard by some people because they respect him. And then we go with the team. The team doesn't set itself on fire. We don't have any Jamar Chases, that literally pour gasoline on themselves. And thank you
right
for that. What you did in the game on Sunday, I was there, but it's a long-winded answer to your question, Hayley. It's an honor to watch this team. I mean, I wear my Super Bowl ring that the Chiefs let me get, the friends and family thing, and it's about 2/3 as big as the other ones. But I'm so proud of that. That was the 50-year one. I was sitting with Harrison Butker from Fox News watching that in Miami, and it's just, man, all those years of frustration and, the aspirations. It's like you've gone to war. It's not war, but you've gone to war with your teammates, and it's so frustrating to see that healing just that one time was awesome. And now we're spoiled big time.
Oh, I spoiled. I have kids from 10 to 17 years old, raised them in Kansas City. And I remember I think he was probably 11 at the time. Colston comes up to me after a game. They left early. It was kind of those 10 years that you're talking about. We had a bunch of years like that before Andy got into town. And I remember him really, really saying, Dad, did you lost? And I was like, yeah.
My daddy lost.
We did lost. And then he goes, Dad, you always lost. And then something started happening. Andy gets Mark Donovan gets into town. Clark took over in 2006, and he decides, I'm doing an overhaul. We're going to get this thing right. I'm tired of hearing a small market. We left Dallas because of that noise and really has started to build something huge in Kansas City. And when you were in Kansas City, you had 14 years of service organization. I had 15. My biggest regret after meeting and chatting with you and then you coming on Hang Time here with us is I wish we could have played together. We would have had a lot of fun.
Buddy, first of all, I know who's a great holder. It's easy to watch. And I ended up having 13 holders, So at first I thought it had to be like a Buddha-like mystical, magical person. And then I noticed if the holder really wanted to do the work, it would be okay. But I could tell I'll tell you what, the ones I had, Steve Fuller early on, Steve Pallor, 1990, I had 24 in a row, 21 in a row, 22 for 24 with Brian Barker. But I can tell you were a really good holder. So, and your personality, I just think we would have had a lot of fun.
We would have probably gotten a little bit too much trouble, I think. I think about Lenny Dawson. I remember talking to him in my early days in Kansas City, and he was just over the moon about his part in the special teams and holding for Jan Stenerud. And he always talked about that. It seemed like when I saw him, he was like, I know you can punt well, but really what you do for our offense is huge because the kicker doesn't have to worry about it. And in Kansas City over your 14-year career there, you're 80%. You had 1,466 points. You were a 3-time Pro Bowler. And they didn't take as
7 different teams in seasons when I made one all-pro teamer. That's the other thing, by the way, is, I got recognition elsewhere, but the Pro Bowl, when we won with Marty, I got it 2 out of 3 years. I should have got all 3 of those first 3 years. But you notice that you're part of a good team. Maybe the offense was a little bit better. And, I bet you could see that too, just when you got recognition because the team was better too, people appreciated you better, even though you're still punting the same way.
Yeah. And you could really finish drives. I think that's the biggest thing I was wanting to hone in on is in 2009, you got put up you etched in stone, Ring of Honor. And obviously this past Sunday, you were up on the Jumbotron, right? And we're in the single bar. I mean,
that's right. Parallel my porn star mustache.
Yes. I love it. That's so good. But I love watching that. And when I saw that, we shared over text that picture, and I think a couple weeks ago, some fans were shooting me, pictures of my ugly mug up on the Jumbotron too. But like, you're in the stadium when a team has your Travis Kelce on defense, you have one, Spags does a great job, but you have a decent defensive unit that, like, when you do throw picks, you do get in trouble. They don't let you go very far. You end up punting a lot. But to have a guy like Harrison Butker at the end of the game take us to that, I mean, I'm sure you felt pretty good about our chances right there at the end.
No, I actually believe that kick cements him, if he wasn't already. I've already been saying he's one of the top 3, but really top 2 with Justin Tucker. Mm-hmm. But I think now I would take him over Justin Tucker, who, by the way, has missed 2 50-yarders this year, which, I think I heard that the kickers are like 35 for 39 on 50-yarders. I mean, give me a break. But Harrison, not only does he hit long field goals, kick off great, but he's clutch. I can't really think at all any of the really big kicks that he's ever missed. And that one, it's right there. So when we hear the wonderful, you know what this is, the world's smallest violin coming from Cincinnati Bengals fans, we got cheated. I'm like, we still had to hit a 51-yard field goal at the end to win. And without him, I don't know if we would have done it. So, yeah, weather conditions were pretty good, but he is lights out. Look at the Super Bowl performances. Look at the game-winning field goals to put us in the Super Bowl in very cold conditions. That's something that you probably can relate to with me, is the biggest games of the season, not counting the Super Bowl, are in the worst playing conditions.
Yeah. And,
I will say this, that the balls are broken in. Jan Stenner was in the owner's suite with me about 8 years ago. He goes, Nick, you should tell them, you should say something about it. The balls are broken in. They're easier to kick. They go farther. Like, Jan, I may be in the Chiefs Hall of Fame. You're in the NFL Hall of Fame. You do that. I do mention it because the ball goes 5-6 yards farther. And then there are about, I think, 18 dome stadiums.
Mm.
And it's really not like, I used to say it's like a golf fairway. It's really more like a putting green now. So those things absolutely do help. But the bottom line is still the bottom line, that Harrison Butker is the most consistent. And with all that he went through, without going into it this offseason, look at how he's put that behind him. I was a little concerned, by the way, since I'm talking so much about his new holder this year, just because he had a really good thing going with Tommy Townsend. But so far, so good.
Yeah, I think one thing, and you guys can maybe touch on this a little more too, I think in Kansas City, sometimes the fan base takes what he does for granted on the field. It's almost, it's assumed. He goes out, it's like, oh, there's a 51-yarder. Great, we already won. Let's go ahead and start cheering because we know it's going to go through. Now, I understand that the Ravens went through a similar thing with Tucker, and things maybe just due to age or different, circumstances. There's a lot that goes into that, right? Maybe he's feeling some different things going on. But with Butker, it's just, you can always count on him. And that is so much pressure to put on someone. I'm not envious of that.
Yeah, and he negotiates his own contract, $26.4 million, but who's counting? 4 years, $17 million up front. I'm not going to cry right now, but it is nice. But frankly, when I juxtapose a receiver getting $35 million or $33 million, whatever Tyreek Hill's is now, with a $6 million per year for Harrison, I'm like, I'm sorry, that just doesn't. I would double it. I just think the great kickers make that difference. Everybody talks about Lynn Elliott when I left it, and it was. I don't think revenge is a first class emotion, but I got lots of calls when he did what he did, and I didn't want to leave Kansas City. That's a story we can go into if you want. But bottom line is, when you have a kicker that's going to make your big kicks, that 1 or 2 games is the difference always. In fact, if the NFL is more competitive, just look at the first win when it was not even a toe. It was like half a toe that he was out of bounds. The games are so competitive. So a great punter who nails you deep, a great kicker who nails the field goals, every detail, every small detail matters.
Yeah, if you look at the Buffalo game from last year as a classic example, as that came down to a field goal for them tying it up. The wind was bad.
Tyler Bass.
I'm sure you're watching. Do you? And I know, Nick, you've got to be doing this. This is what I grew up in my household. Is we'd be doing stuff on Saturday or Sunday, not really tuned into the game, and then you'd hear my mom or dad go, "Hey, there's a punt or there's a kick," and then we'd all be like, "Oh, that was pretty good." Like, that's how we watched football, is mainly fourth down. And we got into the game and to certain players and stuff. But when you watch that Harrison Butker is accountable for 8 of our 26 points during the course of that game, and I know it's two big field goals, 2 extra points, and over the course of the season, it even becomes more and more in Super Bowls. He's hitting these massively long. Patrick and Andy Reid, all of our offensive guys, Joe Blameyer, which is a guy that we can talk about anytime, is a pass game coordinator, but he's doing 2 and 4 minute offenses for Andy Reid since 2018. And when I know that they're prepping that they only have to get to the 39, 40 yard line sometimes for Harrison, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. I will say, last week, there were like 3 games that popped up. One of them, I want you guys that are watching to check this out. Just Google Nick Lowery, Raiders, 5 field goals Thursday night. So 1985, before Hayley was even conceived. I hit a 59-yard field goal, but back then the middle of the field was painted over, so it painted over the hash marks. But anyway, it was whatever, 58, 59 yards, hit it halfway up the net, and it's kind of fun to listen to because it's O.J. Simpson, the O.J. Simpson, on the sidelines talking about me kicking into the net. And then after I kick it halfway up the net, he goes, "That looked like it could have gone 70 yards. So my first field goals, and then on Saturday, September 14th, with my first field goals for the Chiefs were a 50-yarder, my very first attempt, and a 57-yarder, which was then third longest in NFL history, and first time ever 2 50-yarders in the game. So that was the beginning of the era of 2 50-yarders in the game. Now we're in the era of 3 50-yarders in the game. But I'm proud of that. I'm proud of, setting a new standard where we could come and cross the 50. And Al Davis said it a couple times. The thing about the Chiefs is when they cross the 50, they are a threat to score points. But Harrison Butker has taken it to a new level with Justin Tucker. Kickers are better. They're just not that much better.
I mean, there's been many games where I've reported, and I was like, the leading scorer for today's Chiefs game was Harrison Butker. It's wild to say those things out loud. And Dustin, not to cut you off, but to your point, I think it's an underrated position that a lot of people in the flashiness of the quarterback and different things that go on forget about the third unit and forget a lot of times how important special teams will win make or break or make or break games is what I'm trying to say. And a lot of it starts with that kicker. And of course, the punter. The punters and holders are so important. There you go.
Punters are people too, damn it.
That's right. Let's go. Two is Harrison Butker is a big guy. He's 6'3". He's 200 something pounds. But Nick, you were a very big kicker in your day. There's not very many. I see punters that are 6'5", 6'6" right now in the league. They're 230 pound guys. When I came into the league, I was 6'3", 230. And so the punters are kind of big, but with you, the reason why I think that you had so much power back in a time where people were not taking those long field goals is because you're big. I mean, you were a bigger kicker than most, even this day.
But yeah, I put on some weight. But yeah, that helped. I mean, you have Carlos Santos, who did a good job for the Chiefs, doing a phenomenal job for Chicago, and he's about 5'8", maybe. And so when you're shorter, you have to rely on leg speed across the ball. You come from more of an angle. When you're tall like me, or Ray Guy had a beautiful swing as a punter, I'm sure you kind of admired him. I sure did. That pendulum, right? So it's really getting technical, but my femur is very long. And I'm not going to make any jokes about size, but sorry, just having fun here. But the length of your femur, that way it's more the stroke itself. You have that natural power. Yeah. And I think that helps too, because you don't have to try to kill it so much. So
yeah. And it's tough because I know playing with Ryan Suckup and playing with Harrison Butker, I know Ryan had a size 13 shoe, and he had a pendulum that you had to side swipe. And then you have Harrison, he's just as tall as Ryan, and he was, 9.5, 10-foot shoe. So he could wedge that down, and I think that's why he's accurate. He doesn't have to deal with that huge kind of like that foot surface was so massive. Yeah. And I think that is why Harrison has been so good since 2017, and he started out, I think, with a 47-yard attempt right off the bat in Arrowhead. Yeah. And I remember thinking, like, man, we just signed him in the offseason. Cairo gets hurt, and I remember a couple weeks earlier, we were in Denver, I believe, and I've told this story a bunch, but I don't know if I've told you this, Nick. And Hayley, I hope you've heard this, but Cairo is getting hammered from the sidelines in Denver. Like boom, boom, boom. Happened in Oakland too. But he is getting yelled at. And finally, about the third quarter, like we come back out from halftime, halfway the third quarter, I was like, Cairo, they're yelling Carlos. They're talking to you. Just wave to it. They're like, Carlos, hey, I'm the biggest fan ever. I'm like, Cairo, they mean Carlos is you. That's what you're talking about. I was like, just wave to the guy so he stops. The offensive line's like, just wave to him. Wave to him, Cairo. So finally he looks back and kind of like gives the wave and he goes, hey, if this kicking thing doesn't work out, you can be a horse jockey. To your point, Cairo is like 5'7" and 5'8". Like he is a little dude that really has to generate power with, the groin, the hip flexor. I mean, everything comes into play. Yeah, I had to tell that story because when you said he was a shorter guy, but you are starting to see guys across the board. They're getting bigger, they're getting stronger, and the new 2 field goals in a game is 3. You got Chris Broswell doing that on the regular basis now.
Yeah, I've got a Denver story from the stands. I think you're like opening game, and you want to start off like you said, 47-yard at the beginning of the season for and his career for Harrison. You want to start off by making your field goals. And, I'll just speak for myself. I was maybe a little bit more nervous. And there's this guy, as you may have experienced, and certainly the kickers do, because they've got fans that are sitting even where the kicker's net is going to be on either side. And this guy's just being brutal. And I didn't have any attempts in the first half. And then the second half, he's still doing it. I'm just ignoring him. And then finally, I'm like, took a look, and he's eating popcorn. He's back 10 rows back. So I turn around and go, he come back then. There was just a little 6-foot fence right close to our bench. He comes over, gives me some popcorn. I eat some. I go in, nail a 43-yard field goal. I look back up, and now he's my best buddy. Goes from being the most abusive guy ever to being my buddy.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So what'd you do afterwards? Just like go get his number, or how did that?
We dated for a while. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, but it just tells you a lot about the psychology of it. A lot of these guys just want attention, and they're very creative.
Sure.
We should do a show on one of the weirdest things we ever heard. Another time in Denver, we had a wide receiver from Missouri named George Shorthose. You can imagine having short hose on the back of your jersey, and he got some comments a little bit like Cairo did.
Oh, that's tough. Yeah, suck up. When we go to Philly or New England or anything like that, suck up. That's a tough one. Like, what about Chris Blewett?
Yeah,
for Cleveland. I mean, that's one of those things you're like, if you're going to be in this profession, you got to change the name. It's got to be a name change. Yeah, you would definitely think so.
You mentioned the psychology, Nick, and we kind of talked about that a little bit before, like the psychology and the psychology simply of just being any kind of NFL player, right? Whatever position you're at, because so much of it is blocking out the noise. And we see this too a lot of times with coaches, right? It's the coaches who can stay even keeled, who can, don't have highs or lows during touchdowns or different drives. Yeah. And so what have you learned maybe when you were in the league or since being out of the league about how much that factors into your ability to be good on the field?
Well, I sure needed to learn it first by getting rejected by 8 teams 11 times. And, trying one last time. I literally gave up a job, Hayley and Dustin, as a legislative aide on the permanent staff of the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. We got a call from Jim Schaaf, who was then the general manager for the Chiefs. And I said, thanks, got a great job. And I hung up. And then I thought, I mean, literally, this is how close I came to not even coming.
Yeah.
Not even playing at all. And I just thought, I never found out what he had to offer. And then there was no internet. I called directory. I didn't know how to spell his name. He didn't give me his number. There were no cell phones. 1980. And so I traced him back to, he just said he'd had back surgery. And I traced him back somehow to his hospital bed at Research Hospital. We talked for an hour. They flew me in. They gave me a $2,500 bonus, which today is chicken feed or less. But to me, it was a symbol. And then they said they'd bring me in May 1st, rather than late July. And those little things made me decide I owe it to myself to try one more time. So people watching, sometimes you're this close to making whatever your dreams are. And don't be stupid and spend 30 years on something that's clearly saying no, but don't give up. Don't give up. Stay with it as long as you can, because I grew mentally as well as physically stronger. And I was a very different kicker 2 years later. Than I could beat out my hero. Think about that. My hero, Jan Stenner, go head to head with him. And guess who was charting us every day in training camp? Clark Hunt, who was a 16-year-old ball boy who was charting every single kick, get off time, etc. And he's the one that told his dad, Lamar Hunt, the great Lamar Hunt, that I was going to beat out Jan Stenner. So, wow, I came this close to never playing, and then I played 18 years.
That's incredible.
He knew. Yeah, it is incredible. I did not know that. I know that is amazing. That's amazing how growing up in that Kansas City environment. When I say grow up, I mean I got there in 2005. Started fresh out of college, got drafted in the 3rd round there. I remember I had glasses on saying you're going to Dartmouth. I thought I was going to Brown and play soccer. And
really?
That was my.
I almost.
Yeah, I was.
Real, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a poli-sci major in school, and so
I was a poli-sci major.
Yeah, I read that on your bio. I know. Hey, dude, we have. That's why we should have played together.
Damn it.
We can make a comeback. But the interesting thing about you saying that is my dad went to fresh out of high school. He's working in a department store, putting china up on the shelf, and read in the Knoxville News Sentinel paper that they were having tryouts for a punter. I guess their punter was really bad, and for the Vols, and so he sent a letter in to George Cathago, the special teams coach there, and said, "Hey, I punted in high school, but I was also a running back. I'd like to give it a try." And so 2 years out of high school, he walked on, played 3 years in Tennessee. That was Craig.
Yeah.
And, got drafted in the 3rd round of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And just here's a crazy story. I got to grab this.
And by the way, a 3rd round draft pick, I think Ray Guy was the number 1 pick. He was the first time ever they did that. But it was incredibly rare. And for you, 3rd round draft pick, I was a free agent. Man. I was not ready for prime time yet, but to be a 3rd round draft pick way back then.
Yeah.
I just don't know if our family would have been this heavy into punting if it wasn't for my dad just taking the risk that you took.
One thing.
I have to show you this. There's 2 things I got to show you on this, and this is kind of wild, but my dad always made sure it was on all of my Chester drawers. You can't see it, but there's writing right there, and it says, "To my friend Dusty, you will be a superstar. Good wishes, Art Rooney." Wow. And I remember the reason why he signed it. It's a Pittsburgh Pirates baseball because he didn't have any football stuff. The Pittsburgh Steelers invited their families over on Saturday walkthrough, and I was the only kid that showed up that day. It was really cold, so my dad comes back in the locker room, and Art Rooney comes out and goes, "Hey, who's that?" And he said, "Dustin." Well, he thought he said Dusty. 2 people in my life has called me Dusty: Art Rooney, Travis Kelce. But I thought that the interesting thing about it is I've kept it for all these years. Any kind of big decisions I had, the soccer, the football, punting a football. I actually didn't play till my senior year in high school because our field goal kicker got hurt. I show up at practice to kick for him, and our punter is hitting punts behind him and off the side of his foot. Right. And I was going to be a soccer guy. Which my next question is, Did you play soccer? I know you were born in West Germany. I did not know that.
Yeah, this is my dad was very, very, very senior CIA. Back then he wasn't so much, but
oh wow,
in Munich, Germany, and then we only lived there for about less than a year, and then came back to England when I was 9, and I went to one of the oldest schools in London. The year that England hosted and won the World Cup, 1966, I was playing soccer 10 hours a day, and I was good. And we played rugby a few weeks a year, and that's where I saw guys putting the ball on the ground, and I was about this much taller than most of the kids, and I was very good. It was very natural. Then we went to Germany. I found out when my dad died, Hayley and Dustin, this is cool. My dad, at his memorial service, I asked Malia Natilbov, who was the head of CIA in Lebanon in the 70s and early 80s during the Civil War. And by then he was late 80s. He'd been retired for 25 years. I said, how senior was my dad? He said, your dad wasn't senior. Your dad was the man. My dad was chief of station in London.
Oh, wow.
You ever watch James Bond? My dad was the American M. James Bond reports to Judi Dench, and then Ralph Fiennes now, who's the M. If you ever watched the...
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
My dad was the American M, and I did know he met with MI5 and MI6 every Monday, but he was so humble that he just never, ever made a big deal out of it. He was a humble guy from a family of cowboys in Utah and Colorado. And my mother, by contrast, was in the first full class of women at Oxford. And my dad was in the first group of Fulbright scholars after the war. And she was helping run the Fulbright Scholars Program. And they met, and she had tickets to, for all the Fulbright scholars, to the plays and the arts and the culture. And so he's like, she's kind of cute. I think I'll invite her. And they were engaged 2 months later. And my twin brothers were born in London. So yeah, very different background, but playing lots and lots of soccer and, developing that natural stroke. But I will say, as you know, as we started off talking about, that the physical training is absolutely important. And there's so much more good stuff to use and more techniques that don't risk injury, unlike what we did back in the 80s. The mental training, the toughness, to be able to handle the unique pressure of being a kicker in the NFL, mm-hmm. where you got 1.27 seconds to get that ball off over 11 very large, very well-paid people, barely 20 feet away. There are not many positions like that have that level of pressure. And it's not just making the kick. It's how you manage it afterwards, because you made your 50-yarder in the first quarter, but then you may have, one, let's say, with 2 seconds left from 51 yards when you're down 25-23.
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me as a pro is I did a lot of visualization. That was something that Dr. Craig Risberg kind of showed me at Tennessee, because I only had 33 punts to my name in high school. So I walk on at Tennessee. I feel like this is way too big. I have a dad that punted here, a first cousin that was an All-American there punter in the 80s. And I was like, man, this is not good. And I'd hit a ball that was like 70 yards, and then I'd shank a ball into the sandpit where the running backs are running. And Coach Fulmer's like, is that off the same foot? And I was like, oh my gosh. But what a lot of people, and I would love to hear the kicking version of this, because as a punter, it is a little bit different, because people don't mind if you play, but they don't like when I play. I remember when I would park in the players' parking lot right before you go down in the tunnel to walk down into our locker room, they have that bridge that goes right across. I'm sure you went down there tons of times. When I went through that bridge, people were yelling down from that, I hope you don't play today, Colquitt. like, we hope you don't play. And I would always say, what about holding? And they're like, oh, yeah, plenty of kicking, just no punting.
Interesting. Well, speaking of that sort of memory, so there's two quick stories, because we're going to have some fun with stories. I'm 20. I think I was 22 for 23 for 24 in late in the season one year. This happened actually 2 different times, versions of it. So I'd had one miss. And I go into the Quick Trip store, if you know where Blue Parkway is, just south of the stadium, to get some gas. And I picked up maybe a banana or something. And I'm at the counter, and the lady goes, I know you. Yeah, you're Nick Lowery. You're Nick Lowery with the Chiefs. Yeah. I saw you miss that field goal. What's wrong with you? Papa could have made that kick. So that's what we have to deal with. They're always going to remember the one you don't make. So here's another fun story that shows you the humility, but it's just not a bad thing. Being humbled is usually, you learn over time. That's not always a bad thing. I'm playing with the Redskins. Mark Mosley had a pulled quad, so I played 2 preseason games with the Redskins. We played against Atlanta, hit a field goal, missed an extra point. Never had missed an extra point in all of college. I ended up having 562 out of 568 extra points. Not too bad in my NFL career. But I was just learning how to kick off the ground without a tee. Mm-hmm. And we're playing then in RFK Stadium. And I hit a field goal, missed an extra point. So not good, but I mean, they were good high kicks. They were just right over the top of the upright, slightly outside. So I'm making that adjustment, which obviously I did make eventually. And we're running off the field. We played Cleveland, actually, and we're running off the field after the game. There are a couple guys with Redskins jerseys, fans, leaning on the dugout because it's an old baseball stadium, right? And they're waving at me and they're smiling as I go towards them, begin to go under the dugout. Hey, Lowery, you suck!
Oh. Yeah, the heckling has got to suck. I mean, there's enough. I mean, we see it on social media now, like with the comments and everything. But the thing is, people, they're hiding behind a keyboard. It would be one thing to do that, but another thing to come up to my face and be like, hey, I don't know what I would do. I'd just be like, okay, sorry.
Yeah, I think it's a little tough, like balancing it during the week because everybody wants to be a punter or a kicker from Monday to Saturday. But when it's Sunday or Thursday, these Monday night football games, nobody wants that kind of pressure. And so during the week, you're like, oh, you're not a real football player. I mean, that's kind of the mentality of, general overlook for the NFL or football in general until you get into big time kicks in the NCAA, big time kicks in pro football. And then those guys like, this guy's a rock star. We want to take care of our kicker. He's the closer. You guys are now punting. Rarely do you have like a walk-off punt. I can remember one in Denver that I did. There's maybe a handful of kickers. I mean, you could have 3-4 game winners a year where you're not buying, like when Nick Lowery goes out in Kansas City, you're not buying dinner. You're still recognized in all the stores because these people, they're the SEC version of in the NFL, right? I mean, there's nothing bigger than cheese football, barbecue, the beer, the environment. So they know you. They know your face. You got to go in probably with mustache, a hat. Still to this day, right? That's just how it is.
Whatever. But it was pretty cool. I will tell you, when you're playing with a team where the games count, like I had 5 game winners against the Chargers. I don't know why, but I had 3 out of 4 games in 90-91, and 2 of them put us in the playoffs in 90 and in 91. And, those things are deeply satisfying because you want to be measured not by this, but by what you do and learning to be that person. As you can tell, I don't mind talking, but learning to shut up and just be good at what you do and speak with how you play is what it's all about. I will, I'm sure you coach punters, when I coach kickers, I tell them, the bottom line is you really are the PhD in handling pressure. You are the Billy the Kid, and look at yourself that way because you're going to have to be that way. And you may have hit 5 in a row in the game. And if you miss that last one, so being humble, and as somebody said earlier in this broadcast, not too high, not too low. That's what it's all about. John Wooden's whole thing was about that, right? His pyramid of success. It's all about that. Never getting too high. You're never as good as you think you are. You're never as bad as you might think either.
Yeah, that's, as a specialist, I know after when Harrison hit that kick, I think we all just worldwide, I've never been a part of a game where, especially when I'm not playing in it, where I want the kicker to like just miss a kick. It just kind of hurts to see a guy, because you know what he goes through. He's not going to have another opportunity until the next game he plays, especially through the fans, through the organization. And I know that, man, it has to be rewarding for a kicker. And I know it was for me when I had a big punt or like 10 punts in a game where they're like, dude, you bailing us out of trouble a lot today, where you have the best football player in the world, Patrick Mahomes, walking out with his finger pointed at you, saying, hey, you did that for us. Yeah. You're our guy.
By the way, for the listeners, this guy was incredibly good at inside the 20 punts. One of the best ever. And field position is incredibly important. Mm-hmm. Last night when the guy scored the game-winning touchdown from Kirk Cousins, he demonstrated right in front of the ref. If he hadn't been right in front of the ref, it probably wouldn't. I don't know if he would have called it. But now it's tie game, and your kicker has to hit an extra point that's 40 yards long.
Yeah. That was one of those situations where I was like, Andy Reid would have your ass, I just can't imagine someone doing that.
Yeah, no, Hayley, you're absolutely right. And when I watch that, it always comes down. He was big on not doing anything that would show up the organization, show up your teammates.
Yeah.
He always would say, let your personality show, but it's not all about you. Celebrate with your teammates. And when I think about big games, not only we have some of the best players on offense, defense, you got Harrison Butker, Tommy Townsend last year, really just crushing the ball. But you also have that level of hey, next play, next man up, and next play, where Baltimore, they have not won an AFC championship game in a while. They have not been to the Super Bowl in a while. And they have guys, we talked about this to Snead a couple weeks ago, where he just stands up in his face and throws the ball down there. And you're like, oh, and then that's a 15-yard penalty. And then the next time he goes in the end zone, he gets the ball batted out. So we are not only, we're a good team, but we're a well-disciplined team. There's a big difference.
By the way, speaking of kickers, then we had Justin Tucker warming up and stretching right where Travis and Patrick were before the AFC Championship game. I'm like, I'm sorry, this is a technical term. You dumbass. I mean, thank you. But first of all, you did a disservice to us reasonably coherent, thoughtful kickers that would never have done. I mean, the protocol is so obvious. Yeah. I'm so full of stories. Here's another example of being on the wrong side of that 50 when teams warming up. Buddy Ryan was the defensive coordinator for the Houston Oilers way back. Actually, we have Joe Montana, Marcus Allen, Derek Thomas, Neil Smith, and they had won 11 games in a row. We're playing in Houston. Mm-hmm. And in the pregame warm-up, Buddy Ryan, with his big potbelly, walks over and kind of somehow I think he thought he was going to intimidate us. We had the veteran team were like, WTF, really? And it was embarrassing. And that was just walking onto our 45-yard line. But when you're walking to the end zone.
Yeah. Well, he did that the opening week, too. I'm assuming you were at the game, too. He did the same thing.
Week. Did he do it again?
He did the same thing week 1. And it was just like, my guy, what are you doing?
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. I remember on the flip side of that, punts, the last couple punts you hit are backed up in the end zone.
Right.
And I remember several times our special teams coaches would be like, hey, keep hitting them, because Phillip Rivers and Nick Hardwick, their center for the Chargers, are back there waiting for me to get done. So there was times where they were like, hey, hit 10 more. And I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. But yeah,
Phillip was not Shutterborn, he wouldn't complain. And you gave 5 minutes less time to warm up.
Oh yeah, he was just, hey, how many more do you have? And I'm like, they're wanting me to keep going here, and they're like, get out of here. So specialists can definitely get in the way.
How much do you guys say that you in your career stirred the pot? Because there's so much to do, or when I say stir the pot, I mean try to get under someone else's or in their head. Trying to mess with the mentality.
No, here's another memory. So we're playing Buffalo, biggest game of my career, AFC Championship game. It's cold as hell. We're back up from the extra point, 30-yard line, 35-yard line. And, you're going back to, it's really, really cold, mid-20s, mid-January in Buffalo, unbelievably cold. And I bump into somebody right about the 38-yard line, and it's O.J. Simpson. Now, I'd acted with him on this show on HBO called First and 10. Did you ever see that, Dustin? Early 90s. Anyway, I was on briefly with him, but I got to know him. And of course, we'd seen him. He was friends with Marcus Allen. Before any of this had happened, I'd actually had dinner with him and Marcus's then wife, who's now married to Donnie Edwards for 20-something years, who's one of the best people ever, by the way. And we were at Houston's on the Plaza, which doesn't even exist anymore. I don't know why you closed it. I loved it. But, and now 3 days later, I'm bumping into O.J. Simpson, who's thinking he can be in the middle of our warm-up. And so I basically said, METF, hey, big boy, get out of the way. This is my time. Hi, I'm OJ. I'm in the middle of the field, right? Pre-game warm-up. Boom.
Yeah. And I think partially they do that on purpose. When I was in Buffalo one year, same story, super duper cold, and I get this feeling I'm about to hit a punt, and my long snapper is, got his head between his legs, holding the ball, ready to snap, and he all of a sudden shoots up and turns around and looks at me, and at the same time I'm feeling this presence, and it's L.C. Greenwood. And L.C. Greenwood is like 6'8", played with my dad in Pittsburgh, and he goes, "Yeah, hey, Colquitt, tell Colquitt I said hello," like that. And I was like, I think I shanked the next punt. He was like, let me see if you're good as your old man. Now, it was a pregame, but it was one of those things where I was like, man, they do that on purpose. He was so pro Buffalo. They did not want to see those Chiefs go in there and win that day.
Was there ever, everything's different now, but was there a team that you just absolutely couldn't wait to go play against? Because in a way of which, like, I know you mentioned the Raiders heckling and different things like that, but was there a team that you were just like, I can't wait to beat the pants off these people?
Well, I think our hatred of the Raiders was maybe even more intense back then.
Yeah.
And it may come back again with Antonio Pierce, who was a fellow player rep with me, and he's the right guy. I mean, he's I think the right guy for them. Obviously the Raiders. All the ones you'd expect. Broncos. Yeah. I had a lot of field goals against the Broncos. Chargers. They probably burn your jersey.
Oof.
What did you say about burning the jersey?
I said I'm sure the Chargers wanted to burn your jersey.
He did burn my jersey. So
did they really?
I swear to God. So I told you I had 3 games. I hit 3 game winners in 4 games. So now I'm doing the pregame warm up, and they've got me hung, my number 8 right behind the goalpost. Yeah. Wow. And that's really a compliment, right?
There you go.
Oh, absolutely.
They love it.
You want that. You invite that to happen.
I'm sure that there were, just probably many, like, all those little rivalries. I feel like those are things that, like, stories that people don't forget. Those are things that feed into now you're now on the, you now get to watch it from the, I'm sure from the suites, but the different perspective that you now have, I'm sure those rivalries are still in the back of your head, though.
We are blessed to have had long careers, Dustin and I. We are so blessed. I've got 5 joint replacements. I'm not sure how many you're going to have, or if any, but we were doing really heavy deadlifts and squats back in the early 80s, which is just, I could squat 210 pounds 51 times, my body weight, more than anybody on the team could do their body weight. So I love the training, but the really heavy weight, you're squatting 400 pounds with a straight bar and deadlifting, probably not as good as the other options that you have today. But other than that, what an honor to play that long. I wish we'd won a Super Bowl back then. But to return to what I said, it's funny just to watch the team now is so gratifying. Mm-hmm. And it is truly the beginning of a dynasty. We hope it lasts. If we stay healthy, I think it can. I think we can three-peat. But it's also the caliber of the people. Yeah. That's a great team that really are good people. Travis Kelce, you call him Kels, by the way, which is probably the proper pronunciation. With Travis and Patrick, and Chris Jones and all those guys. One great thing, by the way, about Kansas City is always they covet service. They covet community service. You did a lot of stuff in the community. we probably weren't licking our wounds as much as some of the other players, perhaps on a Monday or Tuesday, but still to get out in the community, people appreciate that in Kansas City as much as any city in the NFL. And I'm really proud. I got involved with Kick with Nick for cerebral palsy. My aunt had cerebral palsy, and I honored her. And we would have a new kid every year. We'd add an extra kid to the poster every year that was growing and helping you stay grounded. You know, I'm thinking because my sock has a hole in it, life is going to end. And here's a young kid that's just learned how to tie their shoes, and that's their big victory. You know, who am I to really not be grateful? And we have a lot to be grateful for. And this is truly, right, the era for the Chiefs. And may never come again, or certainly may not. Well, may have to wait another 50 years for something like this.
Yeah, it's definitely special. And Dustin, I'll let you kind of wrap it up here with Nick as well. But just to hear your perspective, to hear your story, and also to hear the charity work that you're doing here. And I know Dustin likes to hit on that kind of towards the end, because every player that we have on, we love to hear about. It's so interesting though, because it's something that's just, it's not required of you. It's just something that every single player we've talked to that's been touched by the Chiefs organization has such a large emphasis on. So very cool to hear. And again, thank you for sharing it.
No, and I will say, you know, my dad served the country. My mother was in the Women's Royal Navy. My mother actually questioned Hitler's record keepers in Berlin because she spoke the best German in England, and that was in our blood. But today I do a lot of speaking on that if you really want to be successful, you got to take all the lessons from your life. Mm-hmm. And if you can hear that, the guys are doing my landscaping around here, but I'm still going to get this message out, which is, you know, lasting happiness and joy. There's a spiritual benefit we get when we ground ourselves in helping other people find their gifts, just as we found our gifts. And I do something called Champions for the Homeless. Our next one is on Sunday. We've served over 100,000 homeless. And when you look into the eyes of somebody that needs encouragement and you're coming from the right place and they know it, it is so deeply healing to you, not just to them. And those are the moments of life that we as older people, I'm a lot older than Dustin, but, you know, those are things we can build off of that we learned first doing good things in Kansas City.
Yeah, and it's I'll say young and younger there. There's no other age. It's just young and younger. That's kind of like the titles that I try to stay with. But you were a Alan Page Community Award winner through the NFLPA. It used to be called the Byron Whizzer White NFL Man of the Year Award. Yeah. And that you're not only were you special on the field, but you're remembered for that and everything that you did in that community. That award, I mean, I've been up for the award before, never won it, obviously, but that's like Archie and Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Warwick Dunn, Gale Sayers, Bart Starr, and Nick Lowery's. I got to hang out with you this summer, and we were doing something for the Wonderland camp down there in Missouri, and just kind of fell in love with our conversation. There's so many people that you brought joy to. People were coming up. Yeah, we had flyers and the whole 9 yards.
You get it.
Yeah, and you did too, but we learned from guys like you that are Kansas City Chiefs ambassadors that come back, that the community embraced. And you preach on that. You said something about Champions for the Homeless, and you talk about unconditional love. You bring in chiropractors, hairstylists. I mean, it's Phoenix based, but like whatever community you're a part of, so dive right into it and make it better. And I love that.
You know, I appreciate it, man. And you know what? It started with Thanksgiving in Kansas City, getting all those turkeys out. I'd love to start, if you want to do something in Kansas City sometime, to break that. But we put a homeless face on the homeless. We made Phoenix, the first city to provide free COVID testing for the homeless. And we've helped people look at the homeless as human beings.
Yeah, people.
Individuals. And that's, by the way, I'm going to connect it right back to Andy Reid. He looks at his players as individuals. And when your coach looks you in the eye and you know he gets the unique buttons he needs to push for you, that's a special coach. And but yeah, what a blessing it was to learn those things and then to build off of it. I love building off things that we learned back then and making my life fuller by helping other people. It's just a natural thing for all of us that we can do.
Yep. God gave you that spotlight, and that's so much fun that you use it for positive and affecting the community that you're living in.
Yeah. Nick, we appreciate your time. Seriously. Thank you so much for sharing everything with us. And Next game you're at, make sure you holler at us. Now, I know his gardeners kind of got in the way there at the end, but he gave us such great insight to what makes Chiefs Kingdom so, unique and important, and also just community-based, which I think is such a wonderful thing to see with the Hunt family running everything, of course, with Andy Reid at the helm as well. And then you see it trickle down into these players that continue to do this on their own, continue to pour back in the community. We heard about his community charities and efforts, and I know you have a little bit more on that, but very cool to hear.
Yeah, and Nick was such a big figurehead in Kansas City at that time. He talked about Marty Schottenheimer a little bit, how he was quick to turn that organization around, compared it to when Andy Reid got here in 2013. He didn't say this, but he could have just said, "Man, Andy came in, didn't know how to go." I was punting 10 times a game for the first couple of weeks, and we ended up going 9-0 in his first 9 games, which is just remarkable. Talking to Nick through the course of the interview, he talked about humility a lot. And when he went into some of these things that I wanted to do in the league, is when you get to Kansas City, in your contract via Lamar Hunt Sr., you had 5 things that you had to do in the community. And when you read them, he would say, "I know what you're thinking. 5 sounds a lot during the course of like a season while you're here, but you're going to do way more than that. And it's because of the people you're serving in Kansas City." And Nick Lowery took that to a whole other level. Wherever he has lived, he has started stuff. He was the Byron White NFL Man of the Year Award, which is a huge, community award that's now called the Alan Page NFLPA Award. And just some of the stuff that he's doing in Phoenix. You can check him out at Nick Lowery Foundation 8. It's Champions for the Homeless. He talks about unconditional love. He brings in chiropractors for the homeless. He wants them to feel just as part of the community. And he likened it to saying, like, when I was missing field goals, I felt, bad about myself and do this. And so he has a big heart for people that are a part of his community. And he talks about it throughout this thing. He comes in and he has hairstylists, and he really just lifts up some of the forgotten people in that community.
Yeah, it's definitely great to hear when people and he also alluded to the point where he had such a minute, just teeny switch in his career I'm trying to say action. Basically, he made a very small change, and that ended up with him coming to Kansas City, him being able to do what he did in Kansas City, and then being able to reap the benefits of that. And instead, he decides to go and put that in the community. So I think that says a lot about the person, a lot about the people that instilled in him. And he talked about his family and different things like that. So very cool to say. I think I was making up the word minute. Was it something? Is that, help me.
Yeah, it was like that one degree. The one degree of change that he talked about, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I know that to given much is expected, and I think that Nick really hits the nail on the head with that. And he is I have met him several times. I've spent some time with him, like I said, down at the lake, and it's always surrounded by charity. Hey, what else can we do while we're here? Yeah, we're going to play golf, but who can we serve? And that's what makes me a big Nick Lowery fan.
Yep. Well, I'm sure people out there listening today will also be a big fan as well. So guys, again, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for joining us on Hang Time. And we'll be back again with another guest this coming week.